Hello, welcome to the Veggie Gardener. My name is Brandon Bryce. All right, so today we're starting back up on families because it is, and we are entering the warm season. Today we're going to talk about the family Cucurbitaceae. That's going to include your cucumbers, squash, summer and winter, along with your melons. All right, so cucurbits, they're all pretty much the same. There's a few different variations, but the hardiness is tender. That means that we can plant them around the frost, around to a little after the frost. So if you remember, semi-hardy is around the frost, but a little bit before. Tender is going to be around the frost, last frost, but a little bit after. So 1 to 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks after. Some of our cucurbits, such as winter squash, we're actually going to wait for a while to plant them so that they mature right as fall is underway. All right, anyway, so they're all pretty much tender. Spacing, if you trellis them, some of them can be trellised. We're going to aim for a 6 to 8 inch spacing on the trellising. If you're going to have sprawling, so just laying them on the ground and letting them go, that's going to be like, let me give you some examples. Trellising cucumbers or sprawling pumpkins. The only plant within the Cucurbitaceae family that is not a vine is going to be your summer squash, like your zucchinis, your crooknecks, your yellow, your green, right? Everything else practically is a viney. Melons are viney, cucumbers are viney, winter squash is viney. So all those can be sprawling. Really, you can trellis most of them. A lot of people do trellis melons. But the only ones I personally trellis are cucumbers. That's because they don't get so big. If you're going to trellis squash or melons, is what most people trellis, after a while you're going to have to give them some support so that they don't break and fall off their vine. The maturity is pretty much all going to be 3 to 4 months. And so when you plant, late May to about early July, although early July I think is probably pushing it a little bit. And so I would, at the latest, I might aim for mid-June, mid to late June is what I would aim for. You're gonna only aim for these later dates if you're doing winter squash. I think I just said that, but that's gonna be like your pumpkins that you want to be, in essence, maturing right around that Halloween time, or at least, before Halloween, but around that time. You don't want them to sit and rot and go bad before Halloween. All right, and then seed to transplant. If you watched my video on cool veggie plants, which I think is probably my favorite, wink wink, I told you that cucurbits can be transplanted, but they actually don't like to be transplanted. They don't like their roots to be disturbed. So they're going to have a funky, almost everything when we transplant them, it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks, except for the cucurbits. Because they don't like their roots to be disturbed, you can't actually let them get a very large root ball. I mean, you can, they have more of a transplant shock compared to other plants that we transplant. So why will we not transplant cucurbits? Well, when you put these guys into the ground, like when you put almost everything into the ground, it's going to take a week for that transplant shock to wear off. And by the time, you're really not getting a crazy head start. Most of these guys anyways, they're not like the other fruiting plants where, like tomatoes, they can produce fruit up until they just die. These guys, typically they produce fruit up until they just run out of steam. I mean, cucumbers, they will produce quite a bit of fruit, but like your summer squash will definitely produce quite a bit of fruit. But your winter squash, it's kind of like it puts out fruit and then it kind of just like stops. Same with your melons. They don't just like you can't just go through and harvest your melons over and over and over. It's kind of it's not a one and done, but it's a shorter window of fruiting and harvesting. Oh yeah, again, just so you know, there's my a legend. So if you don't understand my shorthand, so yes. Anything else cool and interesting about cucurbits? Oh, well, I guess I can touch on this. Yeah, we got time, easy. All right, so everybody, well, some people, most people probably have heard of the three sisters. That is corns, beans, and squash. So that is a group of plants that can live together pretty well. That's probably the most highlighted companion planting that people know of. It is a old Native American traditional planting style, and that's where we plant corn and beans in the same hill, and then in every other hill, kind of like a checkerboard, we plant squash. So corn and beans, the beans produce some nitrogen that feeds to the corn. The corn is a nice little stalk for the beans to climb up, and then squash, because it's prickly, when you harvest squash, you should wear some long sleeves. Rodents, or I shouldn't just say rodents, wildlife in general, do not like the prickliness either. So the squash roaming on the ground around your corn and beans protect the corn and beans from wildlife, such as raccoons and squirrels and other things. Maybe not birds, obviously, but so yeah, so that's a cool little thing. You should go look it up. The Three Sisters is what it's called. And yes, all right, cool. So that's the Cucurbitaceae family. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and yeah, all right. Have a good day, guys. Thank you for watching.